Donc, Lotfi BELKHIR qui va faire une intervention, qui va animer une intervention sur Universal Innovation Framework, where Design Thinking meets Business Model Canvas. Donc, rapidement, chers participants, je vais vous faire rapidement une présentation de notre ami professeur Lotfi BELKHIR. Dr. Lotfi BELKHIR is a physicist, inventor, entrepreneur, and scholar. He currently holds the honorary chair in eco-entrepreneurship at the Waterboth School of Engineering Practice and Technology at McMaster University, Faculty of Engineering. Dr. BELKHIR's current research and teaching are multidisciplinary and involve the advancement of a sustainable society through innovation, entrepreneurship, design, and policy. His school's Master in Entrepreneurship and Innovation program received the coveted Excellence in Entrepreneurship Award by the International Council of Small Business and Entrepreneurship, the first and only in Canada. Dr. BELKHIR received the annual President's Award for Excellence in Teaching and Learning in 2018, and they recently founded the International Conference of Sustainable Entrepreneurship, which was held for its inaugural carbon footprint, received worldwide attention and was featured in major media outlets around the world, including the New York Times, Science Press, World Economic Forum, the Watershed Network, and many others. Dr. BELKHIR's career illustrates his own philosophy of combining theory and practice to solve complex and multifaceted challenges. He founded Kirtas Technology, the maker of the world's first and fastest automatic book scanner, which under his leadership ranked as one of the 500 fastest growing company in America 2 years in a row, and received in 2003 prestigious Best of What's New award by Popular Science magazine. Dr. BELKHIR was both the CEO, founder of Kirtas, as well the architect of all of his company's products, with included state-of-the-art electromechanical and software system. Dr. BELKHIR is a regularly featured speaker on the subject of innovation and entrepreneurship at many venues. He holds a PhD in physics and a master's in management of technology, originally from Algeria, Sétif. Dr. BELKHIR is fluent in English, Arabic, and French. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you.
Je vous donne la parole, c'est BELKHIR.
Thank you. I prefer English, but I can try to speak in French. I hope everyone is comfortable with both languages here. My presentation is in English, and I ask permission from this distinguished audience that I use that as the primary language presentation. However, during questions, I welcome any questions in any language, whether it's Arabic or French or English. So let me share my screen. I do have a PowerPoint slide deck, death by PowerPoint as they call it, but I don't know how else I could present this. Is my screen visible to everyone? So what I'd like to talk today about is, in fact, introducing what we call Universal Innovation Framework. This is work that I developed while at McMaster University, and with the contribution of some of my colleagues as well. And I think it'll make it clear later on why we call it both Universal Innovation Framework and how it plays with the current tools and methods of practice in most entrepreneurship centers by most entrepreneurs around the world in terms of business model canvas and design thinking. Before I do that, you always like to kind of probe a little bit on what innovation means during our times and how it might have changed from more conventional definitions of innovation, because there is a belief, an underlying belief that we're in different times and different paradigms require different rules. And so I always like to compare what we mean by innovations versus invention. Of course, they mean two different things, but how different are they? And what are those key differences? And I've asked this question in many, many different countries, in different settings, and different experts. And it's always clear that the difference between invention and innovation is not very clear in our minds. And this becomes a lot more obvious when we start looking and say, okay, who are the most inventive companies in the world? And invention here is defined essentially by the patent, or the ability to secure a patent, and is measured in a way by the number of patents. And I show these slides, which is a little old, as you'll see, goes back to 2011, 2012. And what you see here is that IBM is number 1, Samsung number 2, Canon number 3, and then followed by other well-known companies. But everybody goes and says, where is Apple in this top list, top 10 list of most inventive companies? And what you find is that in 2011, 2012, Apple had only 676 patents, or barely more than 10% of the issued patents for IBM. Yes, this was 2011, but 2011, Apple was already the most valuable company in the world, with more than $500 million in market valuation. And then you look 7 years later, and this is 2018, and not much has changed. IBM now has 9,000 patents that were issued to IBM in 2018, followed again by Samsung and Canon. And again, Apple is the big absent from this list. And by 2018, Apple had actually doubled its market valuation to about almost $1 trillion. And now today it's around $1.3 trillion. And so this starts telling you that essentially there's something not right. IBM is considered by many, at least of those of our generation earlier, as a very innovative company. And it looks like IBM continues to invest in patents in a growing trend. But then the question that begs itself, what are the top innovative companies in the world? And there has actually been ranking by several companies, but that question is not answered easily by some metric like patents that you could go and measure, or but R&D expenditures. So PricewaterhouseCoopers has gone to more than 1,000 executives around the world, and in all the possible technology sectors and pharma and what have you, and asked them, who are in your mind, in your opinion, the top 3 innovative companies in the world? So this was a worldwide survey of top executives. And the answer was always Apple, number 1, followed by Google and 3M. And IBM in 2012, while its number of patents went up, its ranking went actually from number 6 to number 9, and eventually dropped off completely from the top 10 list. And then you ask what happened again several years later. And in 2015, when this ranking again was done, Apple was still number 1, Google number 2, and IBM still number 9. So this again brings the contrast between how innovation ranking and invention ranking seem to have little to no correlation with each other at all, which again contrasts what's the difference between the two. And so, but when you ask what are the most valuable tech companies in the world, and from 2010 to 2015, Apple is number 1 in terms of market capitalization. And in fact, it grew its capitalization from $500 to $713 billion. Google is number 2, also grew. Microsoft number 3. IBM actually shrunk in its valuation from $204 to $260 billion. Today, Apple stands above $1 trillion. Google is close to that. Microsoft is also way up there. IBM is around $100 billion. It's about 1/5 of Facebook which actually is a website. And IBM today has about 320,000 employees. Facebook has barely 40,000 employees. And Facebook actually has made it into the top 10 ranking in the last 2 or 3 years. So all of those patents that have been fast growing for IBM have not helped it become more innovative. And on the other hand, what we see is that the market does not seem to care much at all about those number of patents and invention. What it cares about is innovation, whatever that means. Because again, the definition of innovation, when you completely divorce it from inventiveness, inventions and patents and R&D spending, becomes very fuzzy concept that's hard to get your arms around. And a lot of people would say, well, actually, yes, of course, innovation has to be market-centric, but it still relies on invention, and it's the successful commercialization of invention. But then that begs the question whether that's actually true or not, or this is just essentially a paradigm or a mental model that we have. And I like to show this list of companies that nobody in their right mind would actually argue are amazing innovators, yet what they have in common is that none of them invented anything. They do not commercialize some successfully some great inventions, whether it's Uber or Facebook or even Tesla, which actually commercialized an invention that was done by Nikola Tesla, the AC engine, back in 1887, and actually dropped all its patent portfolio that was subsequent in the marketplace in the public domain. Dell did not invent anything. Starbucks did not invent anything. And so again, it brings it, yet they are amazing innovators. And so again, it begs the question, what is innovation and how do you innovate? And that's really the subject of my talk today. So, but what happened? It used to be that invention and innovation were pretty close. HP used to have the motto, invent or else. IBM certainly continues to invest very, very heavily in patents and patenting and inventions. We often hear that a lot of companies are innovating when we hear about their inventions and number of patents. Yet, I hope that the previous slides that I've showed you convinced you that no, innovation seems to have is not correlated with invention, and in many ways seems to happen without any invention. So something happened. And what happened essentially is that the information age happened. Is that the concepts of innovation, invention that many of us have are still a carryover from the industrial age. But that industrial age is gone. And the information age happened. The knowledge economy happened. And the knowledge economy, as it happened, has brought with it a totally different paradigm. And we all know that when there is a paradigm shift, the rules of the old paradigm no longer apply. And if you continue to apply the old rules, you are essentially guaranteeing failure in many ways. And the information age paradigm happens to actually work under very different rules. Even on the economic sector, a lot of still universities and the discourse, the economic discourse is still being essentially dominated by the neoclassical economists who are thinking of that supply and demand and the exchange of goods and services, and still, which is based on the central concept of scarcity. The information age, where knowledge is the most valuable resource, challenges that concept of scarcity with the concept of abundance. When innovation and invention are centered around making more with less, bringing more production with less resources, because resources are scarce, the information age totally disrupts that by essentially saying that the real valuable resource is knowledge, and knowledge is not scarce. In fact, knowledge is abundant. And the more you share knowledge, the more knowledge you create. And that is, that actually not only impacts our understanding of innovation.
Sir, je pense qu'il y a... 1 minute, please. Je pense qu'il y a le son à côté, la télévision, quelque chose comme ça chez vous.
Hold on 1 second.
OK.
Is this better?
Okay, very good now. Thank you.
Okay.
Wait.
Sorry about that. Okay, am I coming across clear, or is the sound understandable for everyone?
It was correct, Professor. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Okay, I have an unhappy daughter here who's complaining. Sorry about that. I'll be back right away.
Ramène-le qui nous fait la conférence.
These are the adventures of trying to work from home with a 40-year-old daughter who's always stuck with me. So I think we've come to an understanding here. Let's hope it's...
Totally understandable.
So what happened? So what happened actually is that we used to live in what a lot of people call the farm model, or the farming paradigm, where in a farm, a farmer is trying to essentially maximize productivity, maximize the look and feel of the same product. If you're producing tomatoes, you'd like to have all the tomatoes about the same size. In fact, the Japanese invented the cubic tomato so that they can maximize the packing density of their boxes. If you're producing pineapples that you're going to box, you want all the pineapples again to be the same size. This is true for chicken, it's true for everything. And there essentially you have limited amount of land, limited amount of water. And when you think about it, the whole industrial world was centered around maximizing productivity with the minimum amount of resources. Adam Smith, with the Wealth of Nations, prescribed specialization, that one person does only one thing to maximize that productivity. And all of the universities and academia and innovation and practitioners defined innovation around that exact same concept. How do you maximize productivity? Have the same thing, the same thing as much as possible with the minimum amount of resources. But the information age and the knowledge economy have come actually to change that completely and introduce a new paradigm, which many people call the rainforest. And the differences are humongous, because in the rainforest, you're not trying to actually have uniformity, you're trying to actually bank on diversity. The weed is not something that you want to pull out. The weed is where the value is created. You're not trying to minimize uncertainty. Uncertainty is actually where the upside is, and where there is also a growth, but where growth is dynamic and growth is symbiotic, and in many ways, of course, if we go into the concept of sustainability, is actually harmless and profitable. So the rules of the rainforest versus the farm are, as I said, extremely different. And what they, so let's see how different they are. So in the rules of the farm, following the rules is very important. In the rainforest, innovation happens actually by breaking the rules. This is when you bring a new value. In the farm, you want to predict and repeat, because you're concerned about productivity and efficiency. In the rainforest, it's because it's more exploratory. It's about learning and adapting. In the farm, business planning and planning your business with as much accuracy and is extremely important, In the rainforest, you're discovering your business modeling. In the farm, failure or fear of failure is a big driver because you want to minimize risk. In the rainforest, fear is replaced by hope. And that's hope for success. That's actually driving the dynamics in the rainforest. In the farm, risk is a dirty word. It's something that needs to be eliminated completely. Anything that's risky is bad. In the rainforest, risk is part of the game plan, but you need to manage it and mitigate it. In the farm, failure is even a worse four-letter word. And failure is a stigma. Failure is something that you must avoid at all costs. In the rainforest, failure is essential. It's an option. If you're not failing enough, you're not innovating. You're not innovative enough, like Elon Musk would say. But you need to learn how to fail fast and fail cheaply and get back and learn from that. And in the farm, it's driven by outputs like patents. But in the rainforest, it's driven by outcomes like jobs and sales and so on. So the measure of success is not by the number of patents that you have or the R&D spend, like a lot of high-tech companies I worked at Xerox do. And in the farm, invention is important, but in the rainforest, it's really all about innovation. And that's what the information age requires. And so the question is, how do you innovate in the information age? That's really the main gist of my talk here. And this is where I bring in the Universal Innovation Framework. And the message to all of our youth that are listening out there, and this is really for you guys, is that yes, you can. The good news is that this paradigm shift has almost completely shattered the barriers for innovation that used to exist during the industrial age. In the industrial age, because it was relying on major resources, factories and machines and technologies and so on, it was extremely difficult to transfer all of those technologies and the resources to developing countries to be able to actually compete. But in the information age, all you need is knowledge and know-how, and to be able to innovate and compete with the big boys, compete with the biggest companies on a global scale. And this, we've seen this happen over and over and over to the point where there is really no excuse to people in developing countries to say, yeah, we'd love to innovate, but we don't have the resources. Yes, you do. The resources you need, however, is knowledge and know-how. And so the challenge today for able to come up to speed and be able to innovate on a global scale and be able to compete with developed countries is not a matter of technology transfer, but rather of knowledge and know-how transfer. And that is really the key that I want to focus on. So when we look at the innovation model of traditional companies, and I've worked at Xerox and I've seen this happen over and over. I see it happening in large companies again, like IBM and GE and GM, and the automotive companies have been actually been completely disrupted by Tesla, not only in the products they make, but the whole paradigm shift as well. Is that it's a linear model that is not only linear, but it's also disjointed. And in many ways, it starts with the engineer or the scientist who has some cool idea of a new invention that's going to make a difference in the marketplace. They make sure they patent it to protect it from competitors, because in their mind, that's the only way of ensuring a competitive advantage. And they go on in their labs and with their teams, and they develop your proof of concept, and then they try to bring in the marketing people to say, hey, we think there is a market for this, go do some market research and come back to us and tell us what you found. So while the marketing people are actually doing their market research, the technical people are continuing to develop their prototype based on their own judgment and guesses and hypotheses. And let's face it, a lot of engineers think they know it all, and that the marketing folks only have to throw a finished product over the fence to the marketing folks, And it's just a matter of doing some good marketing and the product will sell itself. Anyone in the business schools know that's far from being true. But unfortunately, this is what continues to happen. As when actually the marketing folks are ready to provide some feedback in terms of market size, pricing, features, and what have you, by that time, very often the development, the technical development has gone on so long. And of course, 20% of the novelty in the product happens, or 80% of the novelty happens during the first 20% of development. At that time, at that point, the team, while they try to incorporate some of that marketing input, they continue kind of are stuck with their product development roadmap, and they will continue going on. But very often that marketing feedback is only preliminary. And this is when the marketing folks can start going through the real market validation and the primary market research and what have you. And by the time the marketing, the development people have a more or less functional prototype or product that looks like an alpha product, very often it's totally disconnected with what actually the customer is looking for. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen this happen at Xerox, which had some of the best research labs in the world and the best marketing people in the world, but nonetheless leads to killing the project after they spend a couple of $100 million on it. And it's a kill because although we could make it work, the customers cannot afford it, or we cannot make it for what the customer is willing to pay. And it's really because of this linear disjointed model. So then when we come back to the way currently innovation is happening, the basic toolkit that's being used by most entrepreneurs is what's called the business model canvas. And the business model canvas is this great tool that was introduced by Alexander Oswalder in 2008 in his PhD thesis, and then did a very cool book called Business Model Generation, which essentially presents the canvas as 7 boxes that needs to be filled out, that have a certain ontology, a very well-defined ontology to them, and that have a certain connection. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with this. It has essentially the value proposition, the customer relationship, the customer segments, the channel, key resources, key activities, key partners. On the right side, you have the revenue streams. On the left side, you have the costs. This, however, has a lot of drawbacks. The traditional business model canvas has a lot of things that simply are not suitable for entrepreneurs and for innovation in general. First of all, it's a static canvas, and it doesn't take into account the evolving and rapidly evolving nature of startups, especially at the early stage. It captures a snapshot of an established business, but certainly not of that of a startup, nor actually does it provide a natural roadmap on how to grow to that level. Also, another major thing with the business model canvas is that it does not actually capture the innovative elements of a startup. So you could do the business model canvas of a taxi company and that of Uber, and they would look exactly the same, and you would not be able to tell which one is actually more innovative than the other. The third piece, that it calls everything business model, when in fact it does not really differentiate between the actual business model itself, which is the delivery vehicle of the solution to the customer, from the market and all its market specific components and elements, and the product and solution. And it lumps all 3 of those into an overreaching definition of a business model. The fourth one is that there is no hierarchy or dependency or roadmap on how to design and manage your innovation using the business model canvas. And finally, it actually lacks several elements, key elements to a startup, such as the competitive analysis, the intellectual property analysis, the financial plan, and does not actually give the entrepreneur whether actually they are going to create net positive value, whether their actually startup is going to be profitable at some point. So the lean canvas in 2010 to try to mitigate some of those problems was introduced by Ash Moria, who actually introduced the lean canvas, which is now used actually somehow more frequently by entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship schools. And what it did essentially still has 9 boxes, but it replaced key partners with a problem statement, replaced key activities with the solution, replaced key resources with key metrics, and replaced customer relationship with customer segments. So it did address some of those drawbacks, but it did not address all of them. And this is where we introduced the Universal Innovation Framework, which in some ways is more simple to use and has clear dependencies, but also goes beyond the universal, the business model canvas. And so the Universal Innovation Framework is what I would call an innovation canvas in some ways, because it does provide, in a way, a graphical anatomy of what every innovation must have, but also it provides a roadmap on how to actually dynamically grow it after you define it. And those are essentially, it has 3 major components, which is the market need, the solution, the business model. But at the heart of those 3 components is the value proposition itself. So if we look at it, the value proposition actually, and this is again something that's not always made very clear to entrepreneurs, has actually 2 pieces, like the heart, and it has 2 ventricles. One is the novelty, and the other one is a sustainable competitive advantage. The novelty, you can think of it as the offensive part of the heart, is where the entrepreneurs and the innovators is now penetrating the marketplace with that novelty that differentiates them with the competitors, that actually attracts customers to them and consumers, that helps them grab market share and disrupt this status quo. So it's the offensive part of the heart. And the second ventricle of the heart is the shield. How does actually this startup going to protect itself from the counterattacks of the competition or the new entrants? And a lot of people understand the novelty. Very few people don't really know how to make that shield. And again, in the traditional sense, that shield was always a patent or a trade secret. But we'll see. Dell did not have a patent or trade secret on their business model for built to order. Facebook did not have a patent or a trade secret for their website yet. Both of those have been able to achieve a very strong and very durable competitive advantage against competition. Same thing for eBay. So, but we also know that if you're creating a lot of value in the marketplace, competition is always going to be there, is always going to invest and work very hard to grab it. So where is the sustainable competitive advantage come from when you don't have a patent on invention in the traditional sense? And that's what we're going to see. So the sustainable competitive advantage is, of course, very important. And what we want to make it clear here is that although you both need novelty and sustainable competitive advantage, they do not have to come. They do not have to come from a technical advantage, but you must have both of them in order to have an innovation. So, as I said, the novelty is what projects your innovation, what differentiates the company, your company from the others, and the SCA is how you protect your innovation from being essentially commoditized. On the novelty side, again, this is something that the information age has brought to us. It can be product-based, like a new invention, the iPhone, or new software like Google, or a new product design like Tesla. But it can also be business model-based. Means it can be disintermediation, like Dell. It can be a service substitution, like Uber or Airbnb. But it can also be market-based, like addressing a new underserved market, like Facebook did with the college students, even though there was Friendster and MySpace before them, or a new experience in existing markets like Starbucks. And for the sustainable competitive advantage, it can also be product-based, like a patent, trade secret, or exclusive license to intellectual property. It can be business model-based, like a channel conflict. Dell essentially took advantage of the channel conflict that IBM, HP, Compaq had in selling directly, and they helplessly saw and witnesses how Dell went from a college student startup to the #1 PC vendor in the world without being able to do anything because they were stuck in their channel conflict. It can be product bundling, like Microsoft did many times to beat its competition, like they did with Netscape, and they're doing it with Teams now for video conferencing and what have you. Or it can be like through an ecosystem integration, like Apple is doing with their iCloud, to essentially lock in all of their customers in their Apple products. So if you are using iCloud and you have an iPhone, and you have an Apple and you have an iPad, and you see a Samsung 10 or 12 that beats the iPhone hands down, you're still not going to switch, despite all of the great inventions that Samsung may have, because you're stuck in that Apple ecosystem and you love it. But it can also be market-based, like a customer lock-in does with Facebook, or customer loyalty, like Starbucks and Apple. And so what we see is that, let me say a few more words about sustainable competitive advantage, is that it's something that's transient. We can never take it for granted. The entrepreneur should always continue to strategically leverage their unique capabilities to keep on raising the bar against competition. It's essential for the management team to be always forward-thinking to maintain performance. And you have to continue to maintain a continuous stream of competitive advantage to reinvestment. So, and entrepreneurs, by following these steps, will be able to continue to create value for their marketplace and customers and sustain their firm's competitive position. So now let me give you some examples of how this universal innovation framework works for different companies and startups and innovators. And I still have not seen to this day a single company in which this universal innovation framework does not apply. So let's take the Apple iPhone, for example. And the market need that they identified was that with the iPhone, their customers could integrate all of their communications and entertainments in a single device. The BlackBerry did not do that. And that's the market need that was different. And their solution was not a phone. The phone was only a native app. It was a touchscreen, keyboardless, app-driven device with an SDK. And that was a major piece of the inventions that Apple did for unlimited extensibility, that now anyone can develop, and Apple gets 30% out of any sale. And their business model initially was through the phone plan, through telecoms and direct sales. There was nothing new in there. So when you look at the value proposition, it was not the hardware, it was the software, two pieces of software, the iOS and the SDK. It was the first smartphone where the software was the master and the hardware was the servant. And that was a paradigm shift for smartphones. This is why today there are only two kinds of smartphones, either an iOS or an Android. All of the other hardware vendors are serving the Android operating system. And so that's it. And in terms of that essentially novelty was actually solution-based, was a technical novelty, has to do with the product itself. And the value, the sustainable competitive advantage of Apple was not actually the patents. And they had a lot of patents, and of course, Google infringed on them, and Samsung, but that's not what provided the protection. The real sustainable competitive advantage that they had was the actually App Store. And that's really what made all the money, and that's what created the iPhone. The rise of the iPhone was really the App Store. And that App Store was linked to the business model. was the business model innovation in itself from a defensive perspective. And so, and this is a case of product innovation. If we look at Dell Computer, and I'll try to go a little quickly here, the market need was also a market need that was not addressed by the big players. So it was for a customized PC configuration, but that had the latest performance at an affordable price, something that the PC retailers were unable to offer to their consumers. So what Dell offered was a custom configuration built to order PC at a lower price than competitors offering, but there was nothing novel in that solution. Nothing. They were making same IBM compatible PCs that everyone else, but the novelty came with their business model. They were the first and only PC vendor that offered directly to the consumer. In fact, Dell started this before the internet. They started it with phone calls. So the value proposition, novelty, was in the direct sales. And so it was attached to their business model. And the sustainable competitive advantage was also was a no-channel legacy, and that was also attached to their business model. You see that on the technical side, there is absolutely no novelty or no competitive advantage. And in this case, it's a case of business model innovation. So as you could see, this universal innovation framework unites for the first time the product-driven business innovation and business model innovation, which usually in business schools are treated as two separate beasts. Now, if you look at Facebook, the market need there was for effective and enjoyable socialization for students through digital devices. And the solution was a website. That website, again, did not look any different from that of MySpace, or at least initially, or Friendster and what have you. And the business model, again, was nothing new, was to sell targeted ads to advertisers, something that Google had been doing and MySpace and what have you from before. So the novelty for Facebook was actually the market, that the underserved market that they really focused on. And their defensive strategy, or their sustainable competitive advantage, it was a customer lock-in. So once the students had their walls and their assets and their pictures and their friends in there, they were locked in. They're not going anywhere. Even if somebody came with something that's 10,000 times better than Facebook, nobody's going to switch. And you see, again, in this case, it's actually a case of market innovation, or people call it social innovation, what have you. But again, it's unified through this universal innovation framework. So what's also interesting about this, and I'm not going into, it's kind of outside the scope of this, is that this universal innovation framework actually applies beyond the economic sector alone, beyond the for-profit startups. It even applies for environmental and social innovation. It applies for public sector innovation. It can even be applied for policy innovation, new policies, develop new policies, because it can be constructed in a generic way where the market need becomes the audience need, the solution remains still the solution, and the business model becomes the value creation model. And in all cases, innovation is defined by creating net positive value for your audience, whatever that audience is. So the three stages, if you look at the three stages of innovation development, because again, there are three stages that we use to actually move the innovation through its natural stages through the universal innovation framework in an iterative way. It's no longer the linear, disjointed way, but it's more of a holistic, iterative approach. So, and when you do that, you realize that actually you are hitting on all the key boxes of the business model canvas in a way that's actually more dynamic and more gradual, and actually goes beyond that. So we see in stage one, which is where the opportunity identification happens. You're identifying and sizing the market need, which is the box number one of the BMC. You are looking at the solutions and benefits, but through a low fidelity prototype, which is box two. You're doing a novelty check and the competitive analysis, which actually are not part of the BMC, but are crucial. You're developing a unique value proposition, which is number 3. You're also doing intellectual property analysis, making sure you have freedom to operate, and defining an IP protection strategy, which is in neither one of the canvases. Now, then you're talking about how do you actually sell? How do you generate revenues? What is your business model and the delivery model? And that's box number 6. And then we're talking about sustainable competitive advantage, or what the lean canvas calls the unfair advantage, which is box number 5. But you're also looking at the value chain analysis. Once you're past that stage 1, then you move on to stage 2, which is an in-depth primary market research, which is actually the market and technology development in this holistic way. A market and customer segmentation, which again goes to reinforce box number 4, creation and understanding of customer profiles and personas, market sizing in terms of dollars of revenues to the firm, a proof of concept development, that's technical feasibility, box number 2, and commercial viability, box number 7, understanding the sales channels development, that's 7 and 8, and the draft financial plan, which then goes to populate number 4, number 6, number 7, number 9. At stage 2, you essentially have your fully developed and validated business model canvas, but you have more than that. But then you have to go into stage number 3. And your business model canvas does not take you there, but the Universal Innovation Framework does. And that's where you have to now develop a minimum viable product. You have to understand product pricing. You have to understand and develop your value chain, both in terms of strategic suppliers and sales channel strategy. If you're doing it in Algeria, it's going to look very different from if you're doing it in Canada or the United States. And that's a key part of your business model and of your universal innovation framework. There was a question earlier to the Minister, Would Yassin, is that we don't have the supply chain. We don't have, well, if you cannot commercialize it, if you don't have a market, that's because you haven't done your innovation right. You haven't built it right in the first place, because those are the key checkpoints and the key stages that you have to go to. And it's not innovation in that case if you have not really approached it in this holistic and comprehensive manner. You have to have a business strategy, which means you have to articulate your vision, mission statements. Who are your strategic partners that flow from that? And what is your financing and growth plan? What is your marketing strategy? And now, how do you go to market with the go-to-market plan? Again, that is tailored to the market that you're going to go with, to go after. So what you find is that as you develop and as you go through these various stages, your universal innovation framework is growing with you, and growing in this very symbiotic and holistic manner. So in stage 1, you develop your unique value proposition, which is the heart, and you articulate what your sustainable competitive advantage is going to be. You understand your market need in terms of problem statement, market size, customer pains, customer gains, competitive analysis. Then you have to go to your solution, say, okay, how is it going to work? What are the customer requirements? How do I map the market needs into product features and functionality? What is the low fidelity prototype that's going to help the customer visualize this? And then what is the IP? Are there any patents that could block me? Do I have any patents that I can bring? Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that patents are not important. I'm saying they are important, but only in the context of the achieving really a sustainable competitive advantage, not in isolation. And then the business model is where you say, okay, what is my revenue model? How am I going to make money? And what is the value chain? Who is going to be involved in not only the supply of some of the components and raw materials, but also in the delivery and in the sales and the marketing of my products? Is there going to be somebody between me and the customer, or are there going to be some channels that are going to be a lot more effective and lower cost than trying to do it myself? And of course, you have to create net value for those channels in order for them to work for you. So And this is where design thinking also comes in, is that design thinking is the process that's going to guide essentially the entrepreneurs from empathizing with the customers to articulating the problem to ideating around how that solution is going to work and how the business model is going to actually deliver that solution to the prototyping and to the testing stage. But again, the design thinking, although is very important, almost always lacks the business model part of it. And this is why you see a lot of projects that were developed within the design thinking process that never actually are commercialized successfully because the business model itself was not included. And you see in this process, there is really nothing explicit about the business model development. But it's a process that is critical for the stage 1 and even some of the stage 2 activities as well. In stage 2, you see that now the market need continues to grow in terms of in-depth primary market research, customer profile and personas and product pricing. But you'd only do those 3 bullets after you've done stage 1 for both market needs, solution, business model. Then the solution has to go now into much more involved technical development, get to full proof of concept. But you could see now that the business model activities are becoming more important in terms of the commercial viability, the sales channel development, and starting to develop a draft financial plan. We see also that there are some cross activities between the market need and the solution in terms of market research and market testing. And finally, in stage 3, you see that the market need has now been well defined and well understood. You're only not talking about product pricing. In the solution, you have the MVP development, which of course is now more involved in the POC itself. And the business model, now you see a lot more activities like value chain development, business strategy, marketing strategy, go-to-market plan, and the financial plan. And now we're talking about production cost and sales map development, sales roadmap development. I'm talking about marketing now, which is the cross activities between the business model in stage 3 and market need. And that essentially now prepares the company to launch and launch successfully, because now everything has been developed in a holistic way, which essentially brings us back from a linear and disjointed model like we presented earlier to a more holistic model where the customer development, the product development are happening actually in parallel and in a much more symbiotic way. And each one essentially at each phase, you are using the universal innovation framework for that particular stage, which is iterative. So you go from opportunity identification to market and technology development to actually company building and business development, and then hopefully successful launch. You also see that the design thinking process only took you through somewhat halfway or 2/3 of the way, but does not take you all the way. Whereas again, the universal innovation framework does. So the main takeaways here is that the universal innovation framework is an iterative and holistic model for a multi-stage design process of innovation. It's dynamic, it's holistic, and it's gradual. It's also the development of the universal innovation framework yields as a subset the same elements at the business model as the business model canvas. So it actually comprehends the business model canvas activities, but goes beyond that, both the traditional as well as the lean version. But it is different, and that's key, from the BMC in the sense that it separates the 3 components, market, solution, and business model, and their own sub-elements in a very clear and gradual way again. And it clearly highlights the 2 key elements of the value proposition, which is the novelty, which is the offensive part, and the sustainable competitive advantage, which is the defensive part. It also embeds design thinking in its stage 1 and 2, but most importantly, it provides a clear roadmap for the design and management of the innovation process. And in that sense, it can provides in a way a working definition of what innovation is about. So that concludes essentially what I want to share with you. And with this, I conclude by thanking you for your attention and saying one more time, Eid Mubarak. So
شكرا جزيلا. شكرا سي لطفي. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Ali. I hope I did not go over too much over my allotted time here.
Okay, we have donc we have any questions? Alors, there's all of them. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions?
Donc, je peux prendre les questions en français aussi bien qu'en anglais ou en arabe. Donc, faut pas.
Donc, n'hésitez pas de poser des questions à Monsieur Lotfi BELKHIR. Ça sonne. What are, donc, la première question. What are the tools of opportunities identification?
Okay, so the tools of opportunity identification is essentially the first, the market research. Market research, both secondary and primary. So a lot of people understand that most of the market research, a lot of people go back to market research reports and Google and so on. That's what we call secondary market research tools, means they are second-hand. However, when you're doing an innovation, something, and the more innovative you are, the less useful those secondary market research tools are going to be. You really have to go out in the trenches, talk to potential customers, interview them, do surveys, email surveys, online surveys, but meet directly with the customers, eyeball to eyeball, like say, to really understand if there is a real opportunity in the market then. And that's where it's different from idea. Ideas are a dozen, cheap a dozen. They, many people have a lot of good ideas, but unless you translate those ideas into an opportunity, those ideas are useless. So that's one tool, is and there are several methods for primary market research, like surveys, e-surveys, focus groups, expert interviews, customer interviews. The other tool, of course, is the intellectual property analysis, is to do a full search on the existing intellectual property, especially a patent search, to see whether that idea or that opportunity has already been developed and patented. And if it's patented, whether it actually blocks you or gives you an opportunity to get around it. The third piece is the competitive analysis, is to see whether somebody else is actually commercializing or doing something similar of what you're doing, and how do you differentiate yourself, and sometimes how do you boost your differentiation after you've understood what the competition is. So competitive analysis is extremely important. And so, and then the fourth piece, of course, is whether you are able to technically develop that solution that meets that that market need and that market opportunity in a way that actually is going to really be successful. So those are the four pieces, and having a plan for that. And of course, the business model. How are you going to actually sell this? Is this a free product that you're going to try to bring advertisers to? Is this a sale? Is this a rental? What are the business model that actually would maximize the value both for the market as well as for yourself, your company, in an optimal way? So those are the 5 basic tools of identifying an opportunity, to say whether this idea can really be translated into an opportunity.
There is another question. My question is, what's the real difference between incubator and accelerator during the creation of startup? Can you cite as example of incubator in Algeria?
Yeah, so an incubator usually is, think of it as a startup as a baby. So an incubator is essentially an organization that brings that baby in so that they fully develop. But that baby is not ready to walk, is not ready to feed themselves by themselves, is not ready to go out in the marketplace and sell anything. And it needs that incubation period to get up on its feet. It's still missing a lot of capabilities in terms of being able to address the legal issues, the accounting issues, the governance issues. It needs some physical space, it needs mentors and coaches, and it needs protection because it's still its immune system is still weak. It needs protection by some experts. An accelerator is where that company is already out there, and think of it as more of a teenager now stage, where it's actually able to run, able to fight somewhat, able to present itself, but it's not mature yet. And the accelerator is there to accelerate that development phase and maximize its impact in the marketplace and maximize its chances of success. I do not know of any accelerators in Algeria. Recently, there have been several incubators. And one of them that I've been working with very actively is Capco Works, that was founded and is led by Dr. Hamid Bakli. Another one is Incube Me. I'm sure I'm missing another 2 or 3, mostly all in the Algiers area. They're all led by fantastic people. There is actually a network called the Rallier that was developed to bring in all of those incubators and entrepreneurs together that I really strongly support as well in terms of vision. And it has, and recently Capco Works was able to actually develop and launch Algerian Startup Challenge over 5 wilayas of Algeria, and was actually sponsored by the Prime Minister and himself in their launch. Again, that's a network that's worth supporting and further developing.
Une autre question. Est-ce que nous devons toujours répondre aux besoins des individus et quelles conséquences directes nos innovations pourraient-elles avoir sur les consommateurs et indirectement sur
هو الموديراتور اليوم. هو اليوم كل واحد دارته. الوزير دار الافتتاح وراه مليح شرفيا مليح نعطيها صفه رسميه ان شاء الله ينعتوها في التلفزيون.
We have several people talking here, Ali. Can you maybe mute the participants or ask them to mute themselves and repeat the question?
Donc, est-ce que nous devons toujours répondre aux besoins des individus et quelles conséquences directes nos innovations pourraient-elles avoir sur les consommateurs et indirectement sur la société?
Bon, en fait, quand on revient à la définition de l'innovation, comme je l'avais décrit auparavant, si l'innovation n'a pas d'impact sur la société, par définition, ce n'est pas une innovation. Ça peut être une invention, mais l'innovation, par définition, doit avoir un impact. Un impact qui crée une valeur positive, aussi bien pour l'utilisateur et le client que pour la société elle-même. Et donc, c'est le concept de net positive value. It's value driven, it's not product driven. Donc, de poser la question, est-ce que mon innovation peut avoir un impact? Bon, s'il n'y a pas d'impact, ce n'est pas une innovation. Donc, la question, en quelque sorte, doit être posée comment maximiser l'impact de mon innovation, ou bien comment traduire mon invention à une innovation en ayant un impact sur la société. Donc, ça, c'est en quelque sorte, j'ai répondu à la deuxième partie de la question. La première question, c'était au sujet de comment est-ce qu'on doit toujours satisfaire les besoins de la société. La réponse est oui en cours, mais ces besoins ne sont pas toujours explicites. Parfois, ces besoins sont implicites. C'est des besoins et c'est des wants, comme on dit, ça peut être des désirs aussi, c'est des besoins qui peuvent être physiques, affectifs, émotionnels, économiques, etc. Mais la réponse, c'est que l'innovation, d'une manière générale, doit créer de la valeur ajoutée pour les utilisateurs ou pour les clients. Cette valeur ajoutée peut être ajoutée en tant que satisfaire des besoins qui sont qui sont apparents, qui sont là, ou créer une valeur qui va au-dessus des besoins et qui va dans le domaine des wants, des besoins affectifs, soit qui sont des besoins qui n'ont pas été bien exprimés, mais qui ont été identifiés par la startup. Et on peut citer plusieurs exemples comme le iPhone, comme la voiture automobile, comme le copieur, le photocopieur, etc.
Monsieur Lotfi, il y a une autre question. Questions to Mr. Lotfi. How about a functional analysis of needs to innovate a product or services by a startup?
That's a very good question. So functional analysis of needs, usually, again, it's similar to market research. Now, if what you need to understand that the customer is never going to clearly articulate their needs to you unless you actually present them with a solution. Like Henry Ford said, if I ask my customer what they want, they'll ask me for a faster carriage, horse carriage. They will never ask for an automobile because they could never imagine that an automobile could actually be made. But he identified initially the need for customers to want to move faster, more reliably, and he developed the automobile and understood that he needed to do it at a much lower cost. So make it essentially affordable to the masses. And this is the innovation that Henry Ford has. The same thing for the photocopy machine. When they did a very wide survey by IBM that wanted to license the xerographic printing process, they found that there was a total of need for 5,000 machines worldwide, and therefore it did not actually warrant the development of the machine itself. It was Joe Wilson, who was the CEO of Xerox, it was actually called Haloid Corporation, who decided that he didn't care about the market research and the analysis of needs, that he's going to do it. And the reason there is because they did not see, the customers did not foresee that they could actually have a machine where they could automatically run many copies that would look just like the original. And so it created a whole new market. It's a market-making innovation. So a pure and detailed functional analysis of needs based on existing products and solutions is only limited to incremental innovation. So that means you already have a product that serves that kind of marketplace, and you want to compete better against your competition, try to grab market share, and you go and look at the analysis of needs, which are well understood. You have a well understood business model, and you try to actually what Xerox used to do in competing against HP and Canon and Ricoh and what have you, and what everyone else did. But it does not lend itself very often to radical innovation. However, that doesn't mean that you should not do market research. To the contrary, but you have to develop at least a low fidelity prototype of what you have in mind and bring that to the customers, and then take their feedback into account, and of course the business model. And this is what I mean by essentially it's an iterative, holistic approach, not a linear, sequential approach.
C'est Lotfi, il nous reste juste, on va poser 2-3 questions ensemble, parce qu'il ne reste pas beaucoup de temps, c'est 18h30. الكلام معك شيق يا سي لطفي. Merci. Donc, alors, quelle est la démarche à initier dans les entreprises publiques pour lancer une démarche d'innovation pour une gestion optimale des ressources disponibles? Ça, c'est la première question. Une autre question, how we can now that we are on the good way and it is a good opportunity when we have an idea?
So the answer to the second question is a lot easier than the first one. My answer to the first one, je ne sais pas. En fait, c'est les compagnies publiques sont... J'ai travaillé plusieurs années à Xerox et à la compagnie Xerox, comme on dit en français. Et j'étais monté d'un scientifique, un développement de produits jusqu'à la stratégie et le planning. Et mon chef, c'était le Senior VP of Research and Planning at Xerox, reporting directly to the CEO. Et notre travail, c'était comment augmenter le degré d'innovation de Xerox. Xerox, qui en fait, c'est elle qui a inventé le Graphical User Interface at Palo Alto Research Center, le PostScript Language, What You See is What You Get, qui a été en fait volé en quelque sorte par Steve Jobs, qui a été licencié par Steve Jobs et plus tard par Bill Gates. C'est la compagnie qui a développé le First Networked Computers, le Ethernet device, qui a été plus tard développé par 3Com. Et donc, c'est en quelque sorte la compagnie, la société qui a lancé l'âge de l'information. En fait, quand on va en Silicon Valley, les gens vous disent à Silicon Valley que Palo Alto Research Center, Xerox PARC, c'est le grand-père de l'âge de l'information. Beaucoup plus important. Mais malgré tout ça, toutes ces inventions, que beaucoup de gens nomment les innovations, n'ont presque rapporté rien du tout à Xerox. Et qu'ils ont en fait ils ont rapporté des trillions of dollars, des milliards de dollars aux sociétés qui ont su les commercialiser, qui ont su les tourner en innovation. Donc, notre travail, c'était en fait comment changer ça. Et on avait l'apport du PDG de Xerox mère lui-même. En fait, c'était le Senior VP of Research and Planning qui était mon chef, qui en fait essayait de changer les choses. On avait développé le Xerox Venture Lab à côté de Palo Alto Research Center, à Palo Alto, auquel je travaillais pendant plus d'une année. Mais à la fin, c'était l'échec. Pourquoi? Parce que les sociétés en général ne sont pas clouées à leurs produits, ils sont clouées à leur business model. Donc, par exemple, le laser printer, la technologie a été développée par PARC, par Xerox. Mais Xerox ne l'a exploité que pour le développement de grandes machines qui faisaient plus de 100 pages par minute. Lorsque Canon avait développé le desktop laser printer en utilisant la technologie qu'ils avaient licenciée de la part de Xerox, ils l'avaient en fait offert à Xerox mère de le commercialiser dans l'Amérique du Nord et dans l'Occident. Et Xerox a dit non. HP en fait a dit oui, ils ont bâti un business de 40 milliards de dollars par an, juste avec le laser top, le laser printer. Quand on demande aux gens qui est-ce qui a inventé le desktop laser printer, tout le monde vous dira que c'est HP, parce que c'est le plus grand vendeur de laser. En fait, c'est Xerox. Et donc, si des compagnies privées qui sont en fait dévouées à l'innovation, ce qu'ils entendent par l'innovation, la technologie, sont incapables de vraiment innover en dehors de leur business model et de leur box, qu'en dirais-je de compagnies publiques. Donc, l'espoir, pour moi, c'est dans les startups. C'est même pas dans les compagnies privées, les grandes compagnies privées. En fait, même ici, aux États-Unis, au Canada, dans tous les pays développés du monde, c'est les entrepreneurs qui sont en train de produire 100% des nouveaux jobs. Et les statistiques sont claires. Le nombre de nouveaux jobs qui sont créés par les sociétés établies est pratiquement zéro. On fait la moyenne totale. Et donc, l'espoir, c'est dans les entrepreneurs, dans les startups. Ce qui me ramène maintenant à la deuxième question qui était comment, est-ce que tu pourrais répéter, Ali?
Oui.
La deuxième question de...
How we can, now that we are on the good way and it's a good opportunities when we have an idea.
When you have a paying customer. When your customer is saying, here's my money, when can I buy it? Then you know you're on the right track. Don't believe a customer telling you, yeah, that's great. If you build it, I'll buy it. That's good validation. That's not good enough. Especially if that customer is your friend or your mother or your dad, or if a customer that you don't know starts calling you and telling you when you're going to be ready, and here's my money, then you know you are on the right track. And what I always tell entrepreneurs, in order to do so, don't go after mosquito bites. Don't go and try to solve little problems, because you can. you have to solve shark bites. N'allez pas vers les piqûres de moustiques, allez vers les morsures de requins. Et ce que je veux dire par là, c'est que lorsqu'un client souffre d'une piqûre de moustique, il peut vous donner l'impression que voilà, dès que vous développez la solution pour ces piqûres de moustiques, il va les acheter. Mais la plupart des temps, il n'en a vraiment pas besoin parce que c'est ennuyeux, mais on peut vivre avec. Mais quand le client souffre d'une morsure de requin, là, c'est lui qui va vous courir après. Donc, concentrez-vous à résoudre les morsures de requin, pas les piqûres de moustiques. Et c'est là où vous saurez que vous êtes dans le bon chemin.
Excellent. Merci beaucoup. Il y a deux qui ont levé la main. Boubacar, il faut donner à M. Ibrahim Bendbiri. Ibrahim Bendbiri, non? C'est bon?
Donc, je vais les autoriser à poser les questions.
Ibrahim Bendbiri.
Voilà. Donc, il est autorisé à...
Ibrahim Bendbiri.
Ouais, il est autorisé à poser la
C'est
question.
bon, Ibrahim Bendbiri. Rapidement, s'il vous plaît.
Il est en mute.
Ibrahim Bendbiri.
Il est en mute.
Tu dois le muter.
Oui, oui, c'est un mutu, normalement. Ibrahim Bendbiri.
Il est toujours en mute.
Il peut le désactiver à son niveau.
Oui.
Ibrahim, donc il n'est pas là. On va donner un autre rapidement qui va intervenir.
Maïdia, c'est ça.
Maïdia.
Maïdia.
Yes, hello.
Hello, Ibrahim Bendbiri. Okay,
Hello,
you can go.
hello. صح عليكم
صح عيدك.
عيدك.
peut le désactiver à son niveau.
كل عام وانتم بألف خير سوا.
On va donner un autre rapidement qui va intervenir.
Maïdia, c'est ça.
Hello.
Maïdia.
Maïdia.
Hello.
C'est bon, il est...
Yes.
Vous pouvez fermer votre YouTube ou Facebook, s'il vous plaît.
كل عام وانتم بألف خير سوا. كل عام وانتم بألف خير سوا. I had a question and I'm gonna repeat my question again. And thank you for the initiative, by the way.
Can you mute one of them? Because I think
Vous pouvez fermer votre YouTube ou Facebook, s'il vous plaît.
Oui, c'est ça.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that. So. I had a question and I'm gonna repeat my question again. And thank you for the initiative, by the way.
Can you mute one of them?
Right. Ibrahim Bendbiri, il faut fermer votre réseau social, YouTube.
Yes, I just did. Yes, I just did.
Thank you. You can now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, I just did. So I'd like to thank you for the initiative. And I am Algerian who lives in Canada. And I am very interested to open. I started already a business in Algeria, and I want to start a startup company in Algeria, back home in my country. And I had a question before, and Mr. the Minister answered it about the e-payment and mobile payment and reforming our banking system and this kind of stuff. So I think it was answered by Mr. the Minister.
I already asked these questions for our minister, and
Yes,
I think he was answered.
You are cutting.
What is the question? Do you have a specific question?
I think he gave you the answer. Okay.
My question, it was answered, so you can move forward. Sorry about the...
To develop the mobile payment?
Yes, it was answered already, so sorry about that.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ibrahim.
You are more than welcome. Yeah.
الله يسلمك. Rapidement, Amaïdia.
Amédia, il est autorisé, non?
Amaïdia. Amaïdia.
Oui, aussi, est en mute.
Normalement,
Amaïdia, si vous pouvez désactiver votre... je vais donner la dernière question à Rani Qouli. Rani Qouli, monsieur Rani Qouli.
Merci Ali. Merci Lotfi, vraiment belle présentation, beau framework. Puis venant de quelqu'un qui est très passionné du business model innovation, low ocean strategy, lean startup, je peux voir tout le processus intellectuel en arrière. Je vais poser une question que je prétends sachante et savante et l'autre plutôt sur notre... on a plutôt une centaine de participants, puis un peu en mode plancher. So the first question is, what about the, the traction of potential customers? When you look at the innovation adoption curve, how your framework, by the way, that I really want to pursue the conversation with you outside of this conference, but how you apply the adoption curve to your framework so that you can move from the from the innovators to the early stage to the early adopters and so on and so forth. So this is my theoretical question. Par rapport plutôt sur le plancher, comme on dit, quand on navigue sur le marché maghrébin, m'étant promené dans beaucoup de conférences d'université ou là pas d'accélérateur effectivement, mais au moins des espaces de coworking ou là. Et je m'excuse auprès de mes confrères francophones parce qu'on a beaucoup de demandes aussi que les questions sont un petit peu en arabe. Donc راح نطرح السؤال شويه بالعربيه باش تاني الناس تاعنا شويه يعني هكا يتفهموا. وكانت تبسط برك les premières étapes يعني the first step اللي واحد راه يسمع فينا عنده فكره ولا باك عنده مشروع ولا ça dépend l'idée تاعو كيفاش يعني يقدر يتوفق ما بين le design thinking, le business model Canva version 1, 2, 3, 10 يعني بطريقه مبسطه وفي عجاله هكا باش يعني المستمعين تاعنا يستفادوا ثاني. ميرسي لطفي. ثانك يو.
Command of the Arabic language, يعني.
C'est Lotfi, je vais vous rajouter une dernière question.
Oui.
Salam, et puis en clôture, salam, professeur Belekhir, tant que vous êtes dans le domaine de mechanical engineering, moi étudiant en mechanical engineering énergétique, quelle est votre proposition qui concerne l'énergétique et l'intelligence artificielle? Et aussi, est-ce que vous pouvez me donner des idées concernant le développement de la technologie de l'énergie solaire?
So let me go back to Rani's question, and then maybe I can chime in a little bit on this last question here. But Rani asked two separate questions, one about the adoption curve and the other one about the phased application of the Universal Innovation Framework. So in terms of the rapid or the adoption curve or the penetration of the mainstream adopters starting from the early adopters, that's an excellent question. The Universal Innovation Framework comes mostly at the front end, all the way from the opportunity, the ideation and the opportunity development to the company launch. It does not really explicitly go into the company growth, except in some key areas. Is that the Universal Innovation Framework is meant to develop the foundation for your big market, for your total market. And so you're developing you're mapping the market needs, you're developing the product, and you're developing the business model for the long term, as if you're directly selling to the mainstream customers. However, we know, of course, that that's a recipe for disaster if you try to go directly to your mainstream customers. So your marketing strategy should be separate from your go-to-market plan. Your go-to-market plan is where you go after the early adopters. In fact, we like to involve the early adopters in the development stage itself. Towards the end of in fact, you want to involve your early adopters in all 3 stages. Ideally, it's the people that you're going to survey in stage 1 that you're going to be selling to in stage 3, and involving them in both the market development and the product development itself. When I had my customers at Kirtas Technologies, they were already lining up with some of them with 50% deposit for a machine that cost $120,000 before I was ready to ship to them. Google gave me $500,000 check when I did not even have the MVP, just at the proof of concept stage. And that's what I used to be able to finish the development, place my first order, and raise $3 million from investors. So the involvement of those early adopters as kind of the extended team is very important. And your go-to-market plan should be targeting them. But in the Universal Innovation Framework, it has also a very separate piece for the long-term part, which is essentially, what is your business strategy? What are your strategic partners, both on the demand side and the supply chain and the supply side, that are actually going to help you grow? And then what is your go-to-market plan, which is more of a tactical plan to actually go and deliver this to the early adopters? And then from there, go through the chasm of bringing in the main adopters. So that's really the part of it. In terms now of coming back to your second question on the front end, how do we simplify it? I was hoping I had made it as simple as possible.
It was more about the language, if you can. Otherwise, we had some comment from participant that asking for a little bit Arabic language or even Derja. So it's more about translation more than simplicity.
Right. Yeah, I know. And this is what I'm hesitating to venture, because these are very well understood technical terms or jargon that unfortunately I have not tried to translate to Arabic, and I certainly don't want to corrupt or dilute the understanding.
Donc, merci beaucoup aussi Lotfi pour cette belle intervention.